Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindie Chavez here. Today is Tuesday, July the 17th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for the day. And it's a little bit different Tuesday this week because this is the first Tuesday where Cindie is not only going to be doing the morning podcast, but she's also going to do the afternoon podcast with me. So we got a little change going on here, Cindie.
Yay.
Change is
I'm looking
fun.
forward to it.
I am too, and I know that our listeners who are Cindie fans are especially going to love it because we do have people who specifically say, "Oh, I love listening to Cindie. I love what she has to say and so forth." So this is going to be good.
That's nice to know.
It is. It is. Yeah, and it's true. It's true. And well, I like it too. I enjoy talking with you. I think it's great. Not that I don't enjoy talking with Wendy too, but still, I mean, I now get Cindie 3 days a week or 3 shows a week instead of 2. That's a 50% increase. I like that.
Well, it'll be fun to meet twice a day.
That's right. Yeah. So I presume you've had a good week and a good weekend and so forth.
I have had a good weekend. I was just like while you were talking, thinking, what did I do this weekend?
It was so memorable.
Seriously, it's like, wait, what did we do this weekend? I think we sort of just took it easy this weekend. Didn't have any special events or anything like that. It was just a nice, quiet weekend. Those are good sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you need to have just shutdown time. Just turn things off and get back to being a human being instead of a human doing, that sort of thing.
Oh, man, you nailed it with that one. That
Yeah.
is so true. It
Yeah.
is so true. And I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I brought that up. I said, about the word doing. And we've probably talked about it last week on the radio, but just
Right.
that whole idea of what do I need to do? And what do I do next? And what should I do about this? And it's like always so present, at least in my consciousness, that question of, and sometimes we need to just, like you said, just be, just let ourselves be. So that was good. Just having a weekend where we didn't have a bunch of stuff on the calendar.
And I think it's important to remember the reason why it's good to be is because being is where we actually have the time and energy and attention to appreciate everything about life. It's really hard to do the appreciating when you're in the middle of doing something. It's only between the doings that we can appreciate. So being is important.
Well, one of my favorite little sayings is doing is work, being is effortless.
Okay.
And one of the things I think is important, I mean, it gets into a deep conversation, but something that probably not just me, but lots of coaches coach around at one time or another is life purpose. And I mean, there are coaches that's all they coach around is life purpose, people trying to find their purpose. And, we talked about a book, and now I can't remember the name of it, but it's kind of made a big splash lately. And it was the book that had to do with depression. And I can't remember the name of it, but I remember telling the story about reading an article, and it was about this book. And I read this story to someone driving me somewhere, so I had a captive audience, and I read the article. But what the person was saying in the article about depression that they found after all this research that they did, and they were someone that suffered with very deep depression, and the medication that they took seemed to work at first and then sort of stopped working, and then they changed it, and they went through 10 years of not ever really finding peace. And one of the things they found traveling all over the world and talking to other doctors and different people was sort of the common denominator is one of the common denominators is that people suffering from depression didn't know their purpose or felt like they weren't fulfilling their purpose. And I'm bringing all this around to where we started. One of the things I try to remember for myself and teach others is that our life purpose, your specific purpose, it isn't in the doing, it's in the being. And it's not about what you're doing. That will just, whatever it is, will line up with your purpose when you're being who you're supposed to be, or the being that lines up with your purpose. I think that's important to remember.
Okay. I hadn't really thought about that way, but it's an interesting point.
And
And
it's going to
let's
connect to, your values.
right. Oh, that's true. Yeah, you can see that. I also
Right.
think
So
about what
sometimes I use my mate as an example because he has a very strong value around justice. And one of the things that really will get him, um, fired up is an injustice, right? Because
hmm
he has a strong value around justice. Well, he works in the legal field, but that doesn't mean that if for some reason he wasn't able to work in that field, that he couldn't fulfill his purpose. There's tons of ways to fulfill a purpose that connects to that value and
hmm
other values, right? So I don't think that anything can actually prevent us from living our purpose because our purpose is just who we are being.
It's interesting what you're saying because I'm also thinking about it in terms of what Neil Donald Walsh said in the movie The Secret on the topic of purpose. He says, "Your purpose is what you say it is." And I always thought that was a
Yeah.
really insightful way of understanding it, that
Yeah.
we're the ones who decide what our purpose is. It's not like it's handed to us. It's not like in his analogy in the movie. There's no blackboard in the sky that says Neil Donald Walsh, a handsome guy who lived in the later part of the 20th century, who, and then there's an underline, and that's supposed to tell you what your purpose is. But there's no blackboard in the sky.
Yeah.
I thought
Right.
that was really good. We are the ones who decide what our purpose is. It's not like it's handed to us. It's not like it's an order from high. It's us. We get to decide.
We get to decide. I agree with that. And also, it's not always going to be attached to whether we're doing a specific thing. It may inspire us to do a specific thing,
Sure.
right?
Oh yeah, lots of people
So,
get inspired to do specific things. Maybe they do the same specific thing over and over again. Maybe they do different kinds of specific things. But the main point still remains: it's up to them, and that's the good thing.
so that was a long winding discussion from just having a weekend to be.
This is true. Well, we're good at that kind of thing. We're good at kind of taking a topic and going off in all kinds of tangents, but that's what makes it fun.
Good thing, huh? We're professional talkers.
I never thought of myself that way, but that's probably true.
Someone said that to me yesterday. I said, "Oh, I have a podcast in the morning." They said, "Oh yeah, you're a professional talker."
Well, I guess we profess it talking. I'm not sure if we're professional yet. We aren't being paid, but
We're working on it.
we're working on
We're
it,
honing our
right?
skills.
Oh, but that's fun though. So
That
let's
was
see.
a start.
We're talking about we have been talking about the book Money and the Law of Attraction and making some pretty interesting progress with it. We're like what, 2/3 of the way through, something like that.
Well, we're further than half the way through. I don't know if we're 2/3
Not
yet,
that
but
far. Yeah.
in the
Okay.
paperback, we're on page 146.
Okay.
And this has been such an interesting book to me because, with the title of it, Money and the Law of Attraction, you would think, okay, it's about money and the law of attraction.
You would think, right?
But their little subtitle, Learning to Attract Wealth, Health, and Happiness. And the book really has been covering a lot more than just money, but also it's all woven together and you really start to understand that everything's connected.
It's been particularly interesting that over the last 2 or 3 episodes that you and I have done together on the subject of this book, the subtopics we've been looking at had to do with illness. And sure enough, you focus on something and it appears. And there have been at least 3 different instances of illness that have come to Louise's and my attention in the last couple of days. One of them really serious, and one of them actually leading to someone's demise. She was elderly, but she died. A friend a friend of hers, her friend's mother died. Another friend has, I think it's stage 3 pancreatic cancer, and that really knocked Louise down too. So all of a sudden, all these thoughts and discussions about illness, and here comes the illness. It's like, whoa. It may not be that you have to focus on illness in order to get sick, but certainly talking about illness brings other topics about illness. I'll tell you that.
Well, I think it's that reticular activation, right? It's something that we're talking about. And so then we notice in an extra way when it shows up because it's something that's been on our mind. But
Maybe
the
that's
thing
what
I
it
thought
is.
was the most interesting was that shows these connections was that like you said, we don't have to be focused on illness. We can be focused on other things that are uncomfortable to us or that aren't going the way we think we'd like them to go. It's interesting when you talk about vibration. I like to think of, we've talked about the emotional scale and energy levels, but there was actually a doctor. I can't think of her name. I want to say her name was Hulda Clark. She kind of mapped out, she's no longer with us. She was quite aged when I heard of her, but she wrote several books and she kind of mapped out with her, I don't know what kind of a device it was, but she had numbers like for different pathogens that were at certain vibrations. And it makes me think, that if we really are attracting things that are resonating with the vibrations that we're putting out there, then maybe it's just that X dis-ease has the same vibration of, I don't know, complaining about the bad restaurant service.
Okay.
Right? When we talked about complaining, and Abraham said, when you start to feel pain in your body, and you start complaining about it, it's because you were already complaining about something else that had nothing to do with illness or pain in your body. I'm like, oh, so are those two things on the same frequency? It's just a crazy thought, but
a little disturbing actually, because in light of the conversation and on the topic of, well, if you keep thinking about unpleasant stuff, you're more likely to get sick or to attract sickness. It's like, I'm not sure I really want to continue down that road.
There are definitely a lot of unpleasant things that we can focus on if we desire at this point.
There are plenty of them, yes.
But I think we're going to get into that too. The idea that, it's not that we're not supposed to ever think about anything. It's a lot different. And this is where we get into being grateful that things don't manifest instantly the moment we think about them.
That's always a good thing, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, we talk about, I've had people on my phone that are upset that, but why can't I bring this thing about? I've been focusing on it and I've been, making a vision board of it and I've been chanting for it and, just all these different ways of trying to laser focus on some outcome. And so we really notice it, and it can be disturbing and frustrating when we're wanting to bring something, into reality and it's not happening fast enough for us. But I think looking at the other side of it is that if things were manifesting instantly, that means other things that we don't necessarily want would be manifesting instantly too. And that might not be such a good thing.
Well, I mean, to be perfectly correct about it, I mean, it is possible for stuff to manifest almost instantly. We've had experiences like that. The difference maker, I believe, is that the stuff that manifests instantly is the stuff we like. There's no resistance to it. It's the resistance that keeps stuff at bay. And so thank goodness that the stuff that we have resistance about stays away longer, because that way we actually have a measure of control over it. Because you're right, if everything just showed up, regardless of whether it was something we liked or something we didn't like, if it all showed up instantly, we'd be barraged. We wouldn't be able to handle it. But
I think there's a buffer zone there. And a lot of times when things seem to manifest instantly, there's more to the story, So
what do you mean when you say when something shows up instantly, there's more to the story?
Well, because I know that sometimes things seem to show up instantly, and yet when I really look back, I think of, the desire's been there for a while, or I did X, Y, Z that also helped it along, or, generally speaking, there's a buffer of time. It might not be a long time. I've had plenty of things show up quickly.
Yeah, I guess it does depend on how much momentum has been built up. That's true.
Yes, that's a good word.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that when we get into a place where the longer we practice, the more tools that we get used to using consistently, I think the more momentum we build up. And I also think that things happen that will, draw us back a little bit. It's just like when we're driving a car, there are stop signs and stop lights and things that cause us to brake and slow down and stop. And that happens with everything in life. And I think there's a goodness to it. I think it has a purpose, or we can give it a purpose.
Yeah, I think the purpose is control. I mean, we want to have control over our lives. Well, there's one way we have control. Like you said, it's sort of a brake. It's like having a brake on your car. Well, brake is a form of control.
True. That's true. Yeah. So, I think that we need to recognize that timing is always perfect. One of my favorite affirmations from Louise Hay, may she rest in peace, is I'm in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
I love that because I think that's true. I think we are. I think we're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. It lessens a lot of resistance for me.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the car analogy, I was thinking about that while you said that, about the car analogy. The car analogy really comes down then to one thing. It isn't so much whether we have control. We do have control. It isn't so much whether enough, excuse me, whether or not something shows up instantaneously. It's about learning to drive the car. And that's where we're all at. We're trying to learn how to drive this car known as deliberate creation through the law of attraction. And it's actually a much more difficult drive than getting into your Toyota and turning on the engine and driving away. It's a higher level skill, so to speak. But nevertheless, it's still a skill, and it's a skill we're learning.
Yeah, every day. Every day we have opportunities.
Opportunities to practice, and opportunities to learn, and opportunities to get results we didn't have in mind, and like do-overs and try again.
Well, it really helps to look at everything in life as an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Especially to me, anyway, in this realm where we're dealing with wanting to be deliberate about what we attract, what we create, is that sometimes we're going to have situations that, we didn't expect. And when we can look at them as an opportunity, sort of like, to me, like a challenge. And I don't mean a challenge in that way of, something being incredibly challenging and awful. But I mean, okay, what do I do with this? How do I get my vibration where I want it? How can this help my alignment? What new tool can I use, or a tool I haven't used in a long time that will, help me get my momentum back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Always a way to do that. And so looking at things that pop up in life that might not be what we expected or even what we think we desire, that's the other thing. I like to look at everything as that it is something wanted in some way by some part of me. Okay. Even if I don't think it is.
Well, then that raises an interesting question, because like I said, with the last few episodes that I've done with you, in the book, we have been talking about various health-related things, and in fact, the topic or the subtopic that we're going to start off with today is, must attention to illness attract illness? Well, kind of following that up to what you just said, is there some part of us that wants illness?
Well, that whole idea about, and I don't know that we've touched on it much, but the whole idea that we chose this incarnation. And well, we did touch on it at one point because it was really interesting. We were talking about, the question people often ask when you go down this kind of road with this kind of conversation about illness. Well, what about people that were born with a deformity or an illness or a challenge? It's not their fault how they came into this world with that. And Abraham was talking about athletes and how, a really, really stellar athlete does not want to come out on the tennis court and only play people they can easily beat.
Mm-hmm.
They want to challenge. And what about the possibility of us actually choosing some challenges to experience and some emotions that may be challenging and some experiences that may be challenging? What about that idea? And that's the idea that I'm coming from. That's the place I'm coming from when I'm like, yeah, no, I think that some of these things part of us actually does want.
Well, it's also, I mean, I think you're making a good point. It's also a thing where I know of cases, I can think of cases in my own life, I'm sure it's true for others, where, for instance, getting sick, I don't mean like, deathly ill, but, catching a cold or a virus or something like that can be preferred. Like somebody is, facing a school project and they don't want to do the school project, and so they manage to get themselves sick. That way they don't have to
Oh,
do the
yeah.
school project, right?
Well, we talked about this, and it was quite a powerful discussion about the idea that when you're a kid, at least in this country, and you're in school, being sick is about one of the only things that get you out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like almost the only legitimate excuse for missing school is that you are sick. And I thought, oh man,
Yeah.
that creates a whole bunch of potential for the body saying, okay, I can handle this.
So it may be true that you don't have to focus on illness in order to attract illness, but it's also apparently true that you can focus on illness to attract illness, and there may even be circumstances where someone wants to do that.
Well, and maybe they're not even focusing on it. In other words, if in your belief system, illness is one of the things that's really legitimately going to get you out of something, then maybe subconsciously that's just an easy thing to create.
I think it's even consciously. I mean, how many stories are there of kids who have forged notes about being sick?
Right. Well, yeah, good point. Good point. Oh, so, well, I'm ready to dive into this, but first I want to tell our listeners how they can subscribe to the podcast.
Good idea.
I think, would love to have them subscribe. How can they do that?
It's actually very easy, and all you have to do is go to the homepage of our website at loatoday.net, because all the instructions are right there. So, I mean, you just read and do what it says to do. It's pretty simple. I mean, it's a little bit different depending on what kind of device you have, Android versus iPhone, tablet, whatever. But the point is, it takes about a minute. And when you're done, you get an entire stream of all of our episodes coming to your device, even as they're published. So your device constantly updates, and you always have the latest episodes available. Plus, you have all the stream of other episodes that came before. So I don't remember what our exact count is. We're on number 567 or 577 or something like that. But there's actually a little gap in there. So it's about 120 less than that. So we're around 450 in terms of the number of episodes. And that's a lot of episodes. There's a lot of stuff to play there.
Yeah, and we've been... Walt and I have been working our way through Money and the Law of Attraction. Some of the other co-hosts have been reading some of the other Abraham books. And so if you're a new listener and you're just popping in on, with us today where we're halfway through, there's still a way for you to go back and catch up on the beginnings.
Yeah, true. In fact, you can even go back to the website, because on the website we have categories set up for each of the books. So if you want to listen to the previous episodes just about Money and the Law of Attraction, you click on Money and the Law of Attraction, and boom, there they all are.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and you can just as easily find them within your smartphone, too, because on the smartphone, we always put in the name of the book as part of the title of each episode. So just keep looking for all the episodes that include Money and the Law of Attraction, and you'll have all the episodes right there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So this is another section of the book where Jerry and Abraham are having one of their little conversations. Jerry, the inveterate questioner, he has questions about everything. He has questions about questions. He was like the ultimate questioner. Somebody I can appreciate, because my dad taught me about questioning. My dad was really good at it too. And so every time I read Jerry, I kind of have this little thought in the back of my mind, and my dad would have said the same thing.
Well, when I kind of glanced at this before we started, I laughed out loud when I saw the beginning of Jerry's question. I thought it was so funny. So we'll let you take that part.
Okay. So Jerry asks, how much can we toy with these thoughts of illness? And okay.
Doesn't that sound like he wants to push a boundary?
It certainly does. For instance, a person can watch on television and offer to come down for a free examination of some part of his or her body. He sees some interesting commercials, I have to say. And if the person says, oh, well, I think I'll just go do that. I feel fine, but why not, since it's free? What are the chances of that leading to what you're talking about, a stimulation of thought and eventually an unwanted result?
And Abraham says nearly 100%. Because of the attention to illness in your society, your diseases are running rampant. With all of your medical technology, all of the tools, all of the discoveries, there are more people who are critically ill today than ever before. the prevalence of so much severe illness is predominantly because of your attention to illness.
And I want to stop and interrupt you for just a second
Mm-hmm.
there, because there's a point along this line that Louise likes to make periodically. We live here in Connecticut. We live near the Yukon Health Center, which obviously is associated with the University of Connecticut. And it's located one town away from us in Farmington, or two towns actually away in Farmington. And when you go by where their facility is, if you went by that facility 20 years ago and then drove by it today, you would notice that it's about 2 to 3 times as large now as it was then, which we think is really quite ironic. It's the Yukon Health Center, and it's just filling up with more and more sick people.
And the building has to be enlarged
in order to handle the influx of all the sick people.
Yeah, I noticed a billboard the other day on the interstate, and it was announcing the construction of a new, hospital. But it's not like it's replacing the old hospital.
Mm-hmm.
It's just another one.
Yep.
So yeah, I saw the same thing.
Yeah.
So Abraham says to Jerry, "You said, how much can we toy with it?"
Which is quite a phrase.
And we say, "You're very particular about what you eat and what you wear and what you drive, and yet you're not particular about what you think."
Well, that's kind of disturbing right there.
We would encourage you to be particular about what you think. Keep your thoughts on the side of the subject that is in harmony with your wanting. Think about wellness, not about lack of it. Think about being as you want to be rather than the lack of it. Your illnesses are not born and perpetuated only because of your negative attention to illness. Remember that illness stems from your feelings of vulnerability and guardedness. Train your thoughts on all subjects, not only the subject of physical health, in the direction of what you desire. And through the improved emotional state that you accomplish, your physical well-being will then be assured. Okay, this is interesting because they say, remember, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't remember you telling me this before. Remember that illness stems from your feelings of vulnerability and guardedness.
Yeah, I noticed that one too.
And so I was thinking about the way in the past month or so, one of the things we've discussed is how to put things in positive languaging instead of negative. Instead of saying, don't do this, just say, do this. So, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, when you think of, okay, if illness stems from thoughts or feelings, if illness stems from feelings of vulnerability and guardedness, then I have a real struggle with this. I have a real struggle saying we don't want to be vulnerable, because I know for a fact that vulnerability is what connects people and allows us to have close, powerful, trusting connections with people. So I'm not sure what they mean about vulnerability.
Well, I think the word guardedness goes with vulnerability in this case. So they're using guardedness to modify vulnerability.
Okay, so, and that's where I was jumping to, guardedness. If we don't want to be guarded, what do we want to be?
Relaxed.
what's the positive?
Relaxed and confident and feeling good.
See, as a matter of fact, this is funny. When you said relaxed, the first thing that came to my mind is when you say about someone or yourself that someone has their guard up.
Mm-hmm.
To me, when you're guarded, when you have your guard up, you're refusing to be vulnerable.
True. Yeah.
And so maybe it's the idea, like you said, it's that if we begin to feel vulnerable, so we put our guard up.
Yes.
They're saying that illness stems from this.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense to me.
This is interesting. They're going, remember this. I'm going, no, I don't remember. Have you told us this?
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that before, but it really resonates with me. It makes a lot of sense to me. Because I know that in those, absolutely, not necessarily illness, actually almost any kind of negative result, not just illness, all kinds of negative results come from what they're calling guardedness, what I will reinterpret as also being tension,
Well, resistance.
stressfulness, and the feelings of stressfulness. Those are all things that we get guarded about. We go like, oh, geez, I got to protect myself.
Right. Remember we talked about bracing?
Bracing, yeah.
And it's how, like, you can tell if you're bracing. I mean, this is the actual term, in that your shoulders will be, I mean, it could be a couple millimeters. No one else may notice it, but you can notice it. That you're holding your shoulders up just a little bit. To me, that falls in line with this. It's a resistance we feel in our body.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, you use the word relaxed, which I love this. It's like, relax.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we know? We know that when we're relaxed about things, there's generally much less resistance.
Absolutely.
So this makes so much sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the way I felt when I first read it. It's like, yes, I know that feeling, that guarded feeling, being guarded against vulnerability. I know that one. That's one that I lived with for a long time. I still live with it sometimes, and I'm trying to teach myself, no, don't go there.
Well, I think I just want to edit this paragraph so badly because I think the important thing is what you just said. When we guard against vulnerability, it's not that vulnerability is a problem. It's that we guard against it. And that's the problem.
Well, it can go both ways. I'll be a little bit challenging about that. I can conceive of times where it's not a good idea to be vulnerable. So, for instance,
I can conceive of times where it probably isn't a good idea to trust someone either. And yet, I always have to go back to the idea that if I trust someone and they betray me, that's on them. Now, does that mean I just trust everybody, just blind faith? No, I do want to use some discernment, but I think we guard against vulnerability to a degree that's really too much.
I agree with that. Yep, I think we definitely go overboard.
If you know of the scientist and social scientist and author Brene Brown,
I don't.
She has a TED Talk on vulnerability that I watch, that I give as assignment to every new client I have.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Walt, your homework.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. I've just been made a client of Cindie Chavez.
I used to give it as an assignment, and I would tell my client, every time I assign this to someone, I watch it again myself. And every time I watch it again myself, I get something different and better out of it. It's fantastic. It's a TED Talk. If you search for Brene Brown, TED Talk vulnerability, it's got millions of views.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of put her on the map, and but it's terrific. And so I'm throwing that out there because I don't want to be pushing a message that says you're going to get sick if you allow yourself to be vulnerable, because I don't believe that's true. And I don't believe that's what this is saying, but it could be read that way.
I'll take the discussion a step further, because I have a problem with the word vulnerable. Not with the idea of being open, but the word vulnerable itself. Because if you look at the definition, a dictionary definition of vulnerable, it's susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm.
Mm-hmm.
That's not openness. That's not being an open person who's attached with their feelings. That's a different thing entirely. So saying that people should be vulnerable, I understand what the intent is behind that, but if we're really going to be strict about it, I'd say it's the wrong word.
I don't know that I agree with that. But I do agree with the fact that, this is why we don't want to be vulnerable, because we know it opens us up to pain.
I'd like to see us come up with an alternative word that says something like being emotionally open. And I'm not sure what word that is, because that's really 2 words or 3 words, really. But there is a definite, so it's like, for me, there's a difference between appreciation and gratitude. And Abraham has talked about that one, that there's like a lesser, it's not quite as positive to say gratitude as it does to say appreciation, because there's some baggage that often goes along with gratitude. And I think there's some baggage that goes along with the word vulnerable. So I really think we need a different word. Well,
I'm sure there's an alternative word that may fit better. We'll have to find out what it is.
Well, that's it. We got to find it.
I'll make that my homework.
Okay. Yeah, if you can find it, that'd be great, because I would like to have a different word. That word, I remember when, I think it was, well, actually, I was in therapy for about 9 months, and it turned out it was not appropriate for me to be there. It was actually the woman I was involved with who should have been there, but that's another story. The point is, during that's when I first became exposed to this idea of vulnerability. And I remember I was trying to learn, I was trying to understand what was going on in my life and so forth. So I was open to listening to this concept of being vulnerable, but there was a part of me that was cringing inside, and I didn't know and understand why. And I later realized it was because of the baggage of the word vulnerable, and I didn't know how to digest that. I didn't know how to separate one from the other.
Well, and that's the thing, is that I'm not sure that you can. In other words, when we open ourselves up, we open ourselves up to a lot of things, and we allow ourselves, in being open, the opportunity to experience tremendous joy and pleasure and happiness and heartbreak and pain. And, we can't decide to only open ourselves up to the good things. Now, I know I have a feeling you're going to say, why not?
Okay, why not?
But it's the way we're wired. The same openness that allows us to experience such joy leaves us open to experiencing some things that aren't so joyful.
I think that's true. I just don't see why that means vulnerable has to be the word that we use, when vulnerable is very definitely and strongly associated with the negative experiences. It's not like there's a strong association of the word vulnerability with the positive experiences. There's a definite
and that's
needle
the point I'm
there.
making. Maybe there should be.
Well, that's always a nice idea. I have found whenever people talk about trying to change the meaning of words to something else, it doesn't usually take very well. And the word that I think of immediately is the word selfish. I've often felt, and I still feel, that the word selfish needs to be thought of as positively, as a positive thing. But I have to face also the fact that most people don't think of it that way. Most people do not think of the word selfish as a positive word. So I can try to say all I want to. Well, selfish should really be a positive word, but that doesn't mean that's what the popular view of it is. The popular view remains that it's negative. That's why I actually was looking for a different word. I even invented one, although that one didn't catch on either. But
which one?
The word that I invented? Oh, otherblind.
Oh, you invented one.
I invented a word, otherblind, to describe what they negatively mean by selfish, so I could take the word selfish back as a positive, but it never caught on. Once again, showing,
I like your word.
I like it too. Yeah, I really like it. But, the fact is it didn't catch on. So, we can try to turn words into what we want them to be, and I think that there's nothing wrong with that. But I think we also have to recognize that doesn't take away the baggage. The baggage is still there. And I think it's really important to find alternatives.
I guess what I'm saying is that we have seen vulnerability, and I think you're saying the same thing. There is a point where someone can be selfish to the degree that they're other blind.
Oh, yeah.
But then, that this is the thing that we coach around all the time when we're telling people it's not selfish to take care of yourself. Like, you have to take care of yourself first.
And I actually, more extreme than that, I'll say that is selfish, and it's a good thing. It's important to be selfish. I think selfish is a very good thing. I just don't seem to be in agreement with everybody else about it.
Well, so vulnerability, it's when we begin judging things as bad and good, the way we judge emotions: bad emotions, good emotions, negative emotions, positive emotions. You will rarely hear me do that. And
that's because when I do, person.
I feel like I'm slipping up. Because I will say
you're a wonderful person. That's why we never hear you say that.
Well,
you are.
Emotions.
You're just such an easy person to talk with and be friends with and so forth. So of course you're going to have that great viewpoint, that really clear, crystal clear understanding of the word. And I think that's fantastic.
Well, the words we use for emotions, in other words, we put a whole bunch of them in a category of bad, and then we guard ourselves against them. And
yes.
that's what's bringing on the illness, if we want to say illness stems from
Mm-hmm.
the fear of vulnerability to the point of guardedness. We guard ourselves against it, against feeling angry or frustrated or sad or depressed, when in actuality, if we would look at those things as not being bad or good, they just are what they are. Because remember that non-judgment is directly connected to, our ability to manifest things. Our level of consciousness is directly related to our lack of judgment.
You're
So
using another word.
Labeling,
You're using another word that I think has problems.
which word?
The word judgment. I think judgment's a really problematic word.
Okay, then let's change it and use the word labeling.
Okay, that's good. I like that.
As soon as we label things as being bad or good, we start to lose ground as far as conscious creation.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, this has been a really interesting.
It shows just how different perspectives can be on the same thing. I mean, we're basically in agreement, but we just express it so differently. It's really something.
Well, and when the sentence is really pointed, right? Remember that illness stems from your feelings of vulnerability and guardedness. I mean, that's if that's a true statement, then we need to pay attention.
Yeah.
Because somebody is saying here, this is what illness comes from. Wait, what? We need to listen to that.
Yeah.
Where does it come from?
That's right. Yeah.
And so I would if it was my preference, I would tweak it and say, remember that illness stems from you being guarded about your vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I agree with the way you're phrasing it. I think that's good.
Train your thoughts on all subjects, not only the subject of physical health, in the direction of what you desire, and through the improved emotional state that you accomplish, your physical well-being will then be assured.
That's the part we
skipped
that part.
Easy, right?
we went over that part, but we skipped it. We spent so much time on that one sentence. We skipped the most important part, which is what you're supposed to do instead.
Yeah. Train your thoughts on all subjects, not only the subject of physical health, in the direction of what you desire. Train your thoughts in the direction of what you desire. And through the improved emotional state you accomplish, your physical well-being will then be assured.
And that's really the most important message right there.
Easy peasy.
Here's the thing, though. If it's so easy peasy, why is it that we have so much trouble doing it?
Well, I'm saying that in sort of a sarcastic fashion.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
Hashtag easy peasy.
Yeah, right.
This is so easy. Simple, yes, not always easy.
Simple isn't always easy. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know in my own experience, my thing has been learning to trust that the more I keep working on my attempts at being positive and to stay in the positive realm, the more I am training myself to go there by default. And while I'm not there yet, I'm not at the point where I'm always leaning toward the positive feeling side, while I still have at many junctions along the way in my life the tendency to look at the negative side, the improvement is evident. The improvement is obvious to me because I lean toward the negative a lot less often than I used to. That to me is the main thing. Looking for the progress rather than the perfection. Looking for the improvement rather than the fact that I still get drawn over to the dark side sometimes.
Over to the dark side.
The dark side, yes. May the force be with you.
Yes, well, that's the idea that, creating a different default.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Yeah.
That's it. And we can, and it does happen.
It was amazing to me when I found out I could at all, that I could actually shift it. That still blows me away. I mean, I first discovered that, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And when I first did, I said, but that's not possible. I couldn't believe that I'd actually done it. I moved my emotional needle. I mean, I really was stuck on it. I really was stuck on the idea that I had no control. And when I found I actually had a modicum of control, even though it was so small that it would have required like a seismograph to measure the amount of shift, because that's how small it was, I shifted. I did it. I couldn't believe it.
Well, small, consistent actions in any area, right? Like any area at all are the ones that get the big results. And so why not energetically as well,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know
Just
that
that
now.
small consistent shifts. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it's amazing. But
It's
it reminds me
incredible.
of what you said about Neil Donald Walsh saying your purpose is what you say it is.
Mm.
So it's like we're so quick to label things bad. Oh, this is bad. Oh, I don't like this feeling. I don't like this thing that's going on. It's bad. Well, you're saying that it's bad. Why not shift the perspective and just decide that it isn't bad?
Funny
It
thing
just is.
too, you talked about deciding what our purpose is. We go through life, so many of us saying, "Well, that's not my purpose, and that's not my purpose, and that's not my purpose, and that's not my purpose," and yet we conclude that we have no control over our purpose. Well, we just demonstrated control by saying, "Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
it."
So, and now let's turn it around and just decide, okay, well, what is it?
Right? Yeah.
So the next topic says, is my attention predominantly focused on well-being? I like this question
It's a more positive
because
question.
sometimes we're wondering, right? It's like, okay, where am I focused on? Am I really focused on well-being? Because we've talked and talked about the two sides of the coin, that everything is really two topics, the thing and the lack of the thing.
Right.
And so sometimes we do have to step back and ask ourselves, am I really focused? Like in the beginning of the book was money. So it was like, am I really focused on attracting money, or am I actually focused on the lack of it? So is my attention predominantly focused on well-being? How do we know?
Well, let's find
Jerry's
out.
asking.
Jerry asks, another dear friend of ours recently built a room onto her house so that her mother-in-law, whose health had really worsened, could come to live with her. Her mother-in-law spoke almost constantly about how bad she felt, how bad her health was, how unhappy she was with life, and about this surgery and that surgery. And then our friend's mother, who was 85 years old, came out to visit for the holidays. Boy, wasn't that fun. She had
The
never
mother
been.
and the mother-in-law.
Yeah. She had never been in a hospital in her life before, but within a week of staying in the house with this other lady who was continually speaking of illness, her own health plummeted dramatically. She was hospitalized and then placed in a nursing home. Could someone's health fail so dramatically as a result of only a few days of negative influence? Good question.
Abraham says the potential for illness or wellness lies within all of you at all times. And whatever you give your attention to begins to foster within you the manifestation of the essence of that thought. Thought is very powerful. While it's not necessary, most people who have lived to be 85 years of age have already been receiving substantial negative influence about their physical body. You are constantly bombarded with thoughts of failing health, a need to buy medical insurance, a need to buy burial insurance, a need to get your will in order to prepare for your death, and so on. So this woman did not receive her first negative influence about her physical well-being from the other woman in that house. However, since she was already teetering there, somewhat unstable about her own longevity, the intensity of the other woman's conversation and the responses she noticed that it extracted from the people who surrounded her did tip the balance of her thoughts enough that negative symptoms became immediately apparent. And then, as she turned her attention toward her own negative symptoms, in that intense environment, those symptoms increased even more rapidly. When someone comes into your experience who stimulates your thought so that your thought is predominantly upon illness rather than wellness, upon lack of well-being rather than upon well-being, where you are in a place where you're feeling vulnerable or defensive or even angry, then the cells of your body begin to respond to the balance of that thought. And yes, it is possible that in a matter of weeks or even days or even hours, this negative process could begin. Everything that you are living is as a result of the thoughts that you are thinking, and there is not an exception to that.
Wow, I'm thinking about this in the context of what we were previously talking about regarding guarded vulnerability, the guarded approach to feeling vulnerable, so to speak. And reading that I think it was the second paragraph where it says you are constantly bombarded with thoughts of failing health and need to buy medical insurance, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we're constantly bombarded with thoughts of failing health, which is true, we get that all over the place. We talk about it, it's just like part of everyday life. What's our response? Is it to feel open? Not really. Our response is to kind of cringe a little bit inside, and now all of a sudden we're in that guarded, vulnerable place.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's true. It's like the idea of when we were explaining bracing, and I said, okay, imagine you're in a car, but you're not the driver, and then the driver says to you, brace yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if you're just parked and the driver says brace yourself, your body's going to have a response, a reaction. It makes sense what you're saying, that we are bombarded with this kind of thing. We turn the TV on and there's prescription drug ads and we see billboards and we hear people talk. And what is our response? Ooh, I don't want that. Keep that away from me.
I have to do something parenthetically too. I have to make a little opinion commentary on these commercials that advertise products that I guess the law is requiring them to do this, but they list all the side effects, and it's maybe something that like clears up a skin condition or something. And one of the possible side effects is death. And I'm thinking, who on earth wants to buy that thing?
Yeah, I have the same reaction to it. Well, and I mean, think about the reaction when you meet someone, in person. You see someone or someone comes over, or you're in an office and, someone comes up to you and they announce to you that they're getting a cold or that they have a bad cold. Or
Thank you so much for that news.
Well, I mean, I don't know about anyone else, but my first reaction is always like, oh, like I want to step back a step.
Step back. Yeah, don't sneeze on me.
And so there's the guardedness.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh.
It's kind of hard to imagine not having that response.
But it does raise a valid question. What do you do? I mean, we are bombarded with this stuff. We clearly don't want to get into that guarded posture. What's the alternative?
Well, so let's see if that question gets answered. The subtopic says others' physical evidence needn't be my experience. So That's exactly what we're talking about, is someone walks up to us with evidence. They have a Kleenex in their hand and they're wiping their nose and telling us, oh, I have this terrible cold. Abraham says,
apparently this one's so direct that Jerry doesn't even have to ask a question. Abraham is right on it.
Right. Abraham says, as you see physical evidence around you, very often that physical evidence seems more real to you than a thought.
Yes.
You say things to us such as, Abraham, this is really real. This isn't just a thought. As if what is really real and a thought are two separate things. That's
what it seems like, doesn't it? Before I learned about law of attraction, that's what I always believed. There is reality and there is thought, and ne'er the twain shall meet.
But we want you to remember that the universe does not distinguish between your thoughts of current reality and thoughts of imagined reality. Ooh.
That's the blow your mind part.
Yeah, the universe and the law of attraction are simply responding to your thought, real or imagined, current or remembered. Whatever evidence you see around you is nothing more than the manifestational indicator of someone's thought, and there is no reason for what others are creating with their thoughts to cause you to feel frightened or vulnerable. There's no such thing as an unchangeable condition. There is not a physical situation, no matter what the state of negative degeneration, that cannot receive wellness. But it requires an understanding of the law of attraction, the guidance represented by emotion, and a willingness to deliberately focus upon things that make you feel good. If you could understand that your body is responding to what you are thinking, and if you could hold your thoughts where you want them to be, all of you would be well.
That's certainly the goal. I like the goal. They state it very nicely. But wow. I mean, they have kind of addressed my question, which is, what do you do instead?
So I think that's where we go with this next little question Jerry asks.
Oh, all right. Well, then we'll keep going. So the topic is, how can I influence all toward maintaining health? I don't want to influence all. I just want to know how to do it for myself. But maybe this will answer it anyway. Who knows? So Jerry says, so what would be the best thing we could do to either maintain or regain perfect health or to influence others around us toward their perfect health?
Abraham says, actually, the process for regaining health and maintaining health are one and the same. Focus upon more things that feel good. The biggest difference between regaining and maintaining is that it's easier to think good feeling thoughts when you feel good than when you feel bad. So maintaining health is much easier to do than regaining health. The best way to influence others to good health is to live it. The best way to influence others to sickness is to get sick. We understand that for those who are now in a place where they do not want it to be, where they do not want to be, it sounds very simplistic to just find a better feeling thought. But it is our absolute promise to you that if you were to be determined to improve the way you feel by deliberately choosing thoughts that feel better, you would begin to see immediate improvement in anything that is troubling you. And it reminds me of how many times we've talked about watching funny movies and making people, bringing jokes and laughter to people that are sick and the improvements that brings. And you told a story of someone who, now I can't remember who it was, a famous person who had a disease that at the time was considered incurable that cured themselves by laughter.
Oh, it was Norman Cousins. That's what
that's who I thought it was, but I didn't want to say it. Wasn't sure. Yeah, so isn't that just a better feeling thought?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, that's what he did.
And you know how we've talked about, or Abraham said that illness, that if you're feeling pain in the body or dis-ease in the body, illness in the body, about how it was connected to complaining about something else. Well, the good feeling thoughts can be about something else that bring the ability to regain the health. Yeah,
that's the really positive and encouraging message for me.
Me too, because it's hard to imagine, my head not wanting to explode from a migraine when the migraine is happening.
That's right.
Right. I mean, it's hard to say, well, just think about what your body would feel like if you weren't sick. Well, that's hard to do when you're in pain and when you're sick. But finding a way to make yourself laugh, watching a funny movie, reading a funny book, those better feeling thoughts are much easier to find in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And where does your mind go? It relieves you of thinking about the illness, to think about something else and to think about something better and to think about something funny that brings laughter into the body. And you've talked about research that actually shows that when your body begins to laugh, your cells begin to heal. So that's important to remember. The thoughts don't have to be directly about the thing. They can be about something else.
That's right. Yeah, and I agree with that. And I find that to be not only encouraging, but also empowering. Because like you said, if you're in the middle of a migraine headache, it's hard to focus on anything else. On the other hand, it is a good time to practice, to see, can I take my mind off it for even a split second? But you also have to know how to take your mind off of it. It's not enough to just say, I'm going to take my mind off of it, because unless you have a good place to go, you're going to snap back even faster. But having a good place to go, a good feeling thought of some kind, something to focus on instead, that gives you at least a goal to aim at, something to focus on that has nothing to do with being ill. And when you're in that, when you're looking at that, then it's easier to pull your attention away. And in fact, you can do it for longer. That's what I found. When you're focusing on stuff that is not at all related to illness, it's so much easier than it is when you're trying to pull it off of, well, I want to stop thinking about illness. That's almost impossible to do the latter one. So let's see, we've got about 10 seconds left. So I guess we can't really do a whole lot with that except to say I look forward to talking to you again this afternoon, because we get to do that again.
I will be back this afternoon.
Yeah, that's going to be great. So we hope you join us next time, which is going to be this afternoon here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.